Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity in the Heart of Austin. Merry Christmas to everyone live in person in Casa de Luz and everyone live on Zoom. We really appreciate you being here. We're going to ask Rick to open us up with prayer. So
Do we want to stand?
Get over there.
Circle up.
If you'd like to circle up.
Beautiful, beautiful Christmas morning. Circle here. Christmas miracle to have Charles here with us.
Yes.
So let's take a moment here and just breathe in this right here, right now moment, this Christ-centered here on Christmas Day as we come together in communion and celebration to celebrate the birth of the Christ into the world. We hold that in our hearts, which is exactly the seat of the Christ in our heart. We connect with that divine love that is represented by the Christ. And we know that the Christ in me is the Christ in you, the Christ in everyone. And we get to see that and hold that for one another. And we do that in remembrance of our teacher and way shower, Jesus, on this day commemorating his birth into the world as he demonstrated the Christ for us. We are ever so grateful for that Christ imprint that we have. We are ever so grateful for Jesus showing us the way to connect with that and express that in our lives. And so on this Christmas Day, we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, living, loving Spirit. We pray in the name and the nature of Jesus, the indwelling Christ. And so it is, and so we allow it to be. Amen.
All right. And now for leading in our welcome song.
So glad you're here. Oh, so glad you're here. The fellowship is sweeter just knowing you're near. I'm so glad to see you. I hope that it's clear. Everyone loves you. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. The fellowship is sweeter just knowing you're near. It's so good to see you. I hope that it's clear. Everyone loves you. We're so glad you're here.
Try to get that energy going. Wake up, Santa Claus. Everybody greet your neighbor. Everybody greet on Zoom. Let's gather for our affirmations. We use affirmations as a tool to create our reality. Let's affirm our prosperity. Together, God is my constant, abundant source of supply. I am blessed with health, wealth, happiness, wisdom, love, and success. Let's affirm our vision for our spiritual community. Together,
With our thoughts, words, and actions, we make a powerful and positive difference in Austin, Texas, and in our world.
and Charles, I'd like for you to come up here and read the daily word.
If I can do it sight unseen, I bet it's Christmassy.
Yes, it is.
Probably.
Bad Christmassy. All righty,
There you
Yeah.
go.
Good thing you have your.
all right. Do I need to down
I don't know.
or step back just a
You
bit?
could.
Okay. All right, the daily word is Christmas. Of course, it's the daily word for December 25th of this year. With joy, I welcome Christmas. Far from home, Luke's gospel story tells us Mary and Joseph welcomed a child with only a stable filled with animals as a birthing place and a feeding trough for a cradle. This story reminds us that no state of consciousness is too humble, no station in life is too lowly, and there is no fear that cannot give way to wonder. Whenever it finds a willing, welcoming heart, the Christ will be born. No matter how I'm celebrating Christmas, I will carry this awareness with me. Today, I feel the dawning of promise and potential in me as I feel the Christmas presence within me afresh and anew. This is the greatest gift I could ever receive.
Merry Christmas. Christ is born within us. It's a very extraordinary day. stay, yeah, on this merry, merry Christmas day. Merry Christmas Day, oh, on this very, very Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas Day.
Thank you so much, Leanne.
You're welcome.
Excellent job, man. That's right. Awesome. So thank you all for being here with us this morning at Casa de Luz. Thank you all for being here with us on Zoom this morning. It is Christmas Day. Christmas Day is on a Sunday this year, isn't that? So I was thinking about this last week. You know, we went through the Advent season, right? And I think I might have even said this in one of the Advent services. This is the longest Advent season in the cycle, because the Advent Sundays happen on the 4 Sundays before Christmas. But because Christmas is on a Sunday, it was a full 4-week run. And then we have Christmas Day. So it's the longest period. And perhaps not coincidentally, next year will be the shortest period.
Ooh, nice.
Because Christmas Eve will be a Sunday. And so that'll be the 4th Advent Sunday, and Christmas Day will be the Monday. So it's a kind of an unusual, you know, kind of thing.
Well, you really notice it when you're doing the music too, because it's a lot of Advent songs.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. It was a long Advent season and everything, but this is the culmination here on Christmas Day. So in the weeks leading up to this, we've been preparing ourselves in consciousness for that event of the Christ being born into the world in the form of the baby Jesus, right? That's our symbolic way into it. What we're going to be talking about here today is that, you know, the Christ, you know, the birth of the Christ is in reality not just for Christmas Day. It's an ongoing, perpetual dynamic that happens within us each and every day of our lives. And one, I think somewhere I'm maybe paraphrasing this a little bit from A Course in Miracles, but the idea is that the second coming is always coming.
Yeah.
And that we experience it in an instant. Debbie and I were talking about this a little earlier today. It's like, you know, sometimes takes you 20 years to get to that point where the miracle happens in an instant. But it took me 20 years to get myself in the position to be ready to receive the miracle. But that in every one of those moments during that 20 years leading up to it, the miracle was always present as a possibility in each and every instant. It's what the Course in Miracles calls the holy instant. And that's a perpetual thing. Like we're going to be experiencing many, many holy instants just in the context of this service here today. And it's an ongoing perpetual dynamic. And of course, in Miracles, it talks about us, you know, choosing between love and fear, love and fear, love and fear all day long, all of our lives, every day of our lives. And that's that constant choice that's in front of us, the yin and yang of it, so to speak. And that when we're choosing from love, we're coming from that Christ identity. And when we're choosing from fear, we are temporarily forgetting that Christ identity, and we react to circumstances in our humanity. And then after we're done doing that, after we get sick and tired of being sick and tired of doing it that way, we can choose again and recalibrate back to that Christ-centered love. And so for me, in my experience, like I used to not, cynical is not the right word for it, maybe skeptical when I was younger and coming up. Like I wouldn't take sort of the fundamental Christianity kind of that I grew up in Catholicism and Protestant orientations and try and take these things literally, where my intellectual mind would want to debunk those. Well, that doesn't make literal sense, right? So for many, many years until my probably late 30s, before I got myself into a position in life to where I was like, you know what, this way that I have been doing it is really not bringing me any peace and satisfaction. And maybe there is another way. So if there is another way, and then I became willing in that moment, if there is another way, show me. I'll keep myself open. I'll be willing to learn, and I'll be willing to recalibrate my experience and my knowledge and my application of that. If there's another path that can lead me to peace, because this one I've been on, it's getting me a lot of things, but peace is not one of them, right? So I became willing in that moment. And it's just that same idea. It took me 37 years to get to that point, but in that moment of willingness to allow that Christ to come in and to connect with that, that's when the miracle happened. It still took some time to work it out, to begin walking that walk, learning, we first learn the talk, so to speak, and we kind of reprogram ourselves about how we're expressing ourselves. And then we still stub our toes and we still get off track and so forth. But then as we go forward and we continue doing that, it doesn't take us as long. We don't stay off its track as long. And then it's easier for us to recalibrate back to the center. And then over the course of time, it's like practice, 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 wax on, wax off. And as we practice that, then it becomes more habitual and it becomes our default. And that's what we're really about here, is that when we get to that place where we're the awareness of the Christ within, and that takes our conscious connection with that as we go forward and we continue to practice that, then it becomes the default. And we get less and less out of bounds. And even if we do get out of bounds, we spend less and less time there. We recalibrate because we know that we're coming from that place of authenticity. So I'm gonna read a few things here that I pulled out of A Course in Miracles. And actually this first one that I'm going to read from is actually from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Charles Fillmore's, what he called his crowning achievement, actually. Have you all spent much time in the metaphysics? So you can look up anything and kind of pull out a lot of deep things. This is what he says about the birth of the Christ. The birth of Christ in man is the bringing to consciousness of the spiritual idea of the Christ of God through the quickening power of the word and truth, capital T, truth, right? That as we align ourselves with that word of truth, that's the beginning, that's the awakening of that consciousness of the Christ within. There's a lot of things in the world out there that are true about the world, but many of those things that are true about the world are not truth, capital T. Yeah. In fact, quite frankly, a lot of those manifestations are manifested in ways that are trying to not acknowledge the truth of things and having it our own way, so to speak. Those paths sometimes are fraught with all kinds of peril and so forth, especially peril for our peace. And for me, that's what I always recalibrate back to. If I'm not at peace, I've chosen wrongly. And if I want to be at peace, I choose again. And once again, in the Course in Miracles language, that choice is simple because it's love or fear. If I'm choosing fear, my peace is out the window. It's the first casualty when I've chosen fear. If I want to get back to my peace, I choose again, I choose love. And if there's one word in Jesus' entire gospel of what he taught, that you had to distill the whole teaching down to one word, that word would be love. So it's simple for us. At Christmas Day, it's not only the birth of Jesus, who came along to demonstrate the Christ, it's really that birth and rebirth, that perpetual dynamic of the birth and rebirth of love. Every time we choose love, we add that to the mix, right? There's a whole big old cosmic soup going on up there, and each one of us gets to add flavors and ingredients to that. As we choose love, we're adding that to the stew as well. I made a gumbo yesterday, so I put a lot of love into that gumbo, and I'm going to go home from here and I'm going to partake of that gumbo. But it's the same thing. We're putting in those ingredients, and anything that we do with love, we know that's part of our divine imprint. Whether it's gardening or playing music or writing poetry or painting or just creating beauty in the world, that we're coming from that place of love. And if we're coming from that place of love, we're coming from the place of Christ. So today's talk title is The Christ is Now. And the idea behind that is that it's always now. It's always now. The Christ is always now. It's not just for Christmas Day. It's always now, every day. And as we choose that becomes our habit, our default, like I said a moment ago, then we have to think about it less and less because we're learning to embody that Christ and express that Christ naturally. And, quite frankly, when we're learning that, it feels unnatural, right? And we may even be a little bashful about it, like we don't want to be criticized or anything like that. So we hide our light under that bushel basket, so to speak. But that light is not intended to be in the bushel basket. That light is coming from within, that kingdom of heaven within, and we're to express that and to allow that. We do that with music. We do that with all kinds of things. Let that joy out. And joy is one of those themes of the Advent season, right? In fact, it was last week's. So we had faith, we had peace, we had love, we had joy, and now here we are at Christmas Day. So that Christ is always now. We'll talk a little bit about that and about the holy instant as the Course in Miracles articulates it. And I said a moment ago, the second coming is always coming. And what I mean by that, it's not a one-time event. Like we're not, we may have a change of mind. We may have a revelation, an epiphany. That's like that moment in time where we go, yeah, that's when things changed. And that's when I was saved, so to speak. But that salvation is an ongoing dynamic, because even if I've been saved and been saved for a long time, I can still fall off the wagon. I can still choose to go in a ditch if I want to. And quite frankly, God will not stop you necessarily from choosing that if you're bent on choosing that. But God will also be right back there when you want to choose again, right? And so that birth of the Christ, the birth and the rebirth is a dynamic, perpetual process. And of course, in Miracles, it says this: the sign of Christmas is a star, a light in the darkness. See it not outside yourself, but shining in the heaven within, and accept it as the sign the time of Christ has come. Right? That light, the light never goes out, right? It's always there within us. Like you can dim the pilot light, but you can't extinguish it. It's always still to be present. Yesterday, we a little aside, because I didn't think about this until I was saying that out loud, but yesterday we didn't realize this, but 2 days ago, our pilot light in our hot water heater went out. We didn't realize it the first day. Second day, we definitely realized it. Second day, we definitely realized it. And then it was like, wow. And then we started like looking around, the oven wouldn't light, and this, that, and the other. And so we're like trying to recalibrate this and trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody's answering the phone at Atmos to let us know what's going on, but basically the pressure was low. And so things that were high usage, like a hot water heater, were getting dimmed down. And so we had to reset that pilot light, right? But in order to do that, to accommodate that first thing, we had to turn like the heaters off and allow the system to kind of recharge for a moment, and then hit that pilot light. And once that pilot light was on the hot water heater, then we booted everything else back up and it came back on. But it's that way. It's like that pilot light, that inner light that's within us, it never goes out. Thankfully, we don't have to reset it. All we have to do is turn the flame up, turn the spiritual gas up, as it were, and let it shine more. But we can never extinguish the light. I mean, that in it of itself is like a whole talk right there, just on that it can never go out, and what a cause for hope that is. And so Jesus comes into the world and he teaches us, you too can do what I do. The Christ in me is the Christ in you. Of course, in Miracles talks about this idea of the Christ vision, and how I know that I'm seeing with the Christ vision is when I become willing to see the Christ in another person. That in that instant that I see the Christ in another person, I am actually seeing with the Christ vision. I couldn't see it in my own little Rick Busby personality thing, because there'd be too many things in the way, too many criticisms and judgments. But when I suspend that and I say, okay, I'm going to see the Christ in Maryland, that in that instant that I'm doing that, that's the expression of the Christ within me. It's the namaste. Y'all know the namaste. It's the same thing. The divine in me sees and recognizes the divine in you. It's the same thing. So that's how you know you're seeing with the eyes of Christ, is by being willing to see it in another, and not just in another, in all others. That's the walk. That's the walk we're called to. That's the practice. And we may fall short of the glory from time to time, but that is the walk. And if I've fallen short of the glory and I find myself up there at it again, I keep quoting that great mystic Britney Spears every time I'm here for some reason. Upside it again, she comes to mind every time I'm here. But we do, and I'll do it before the day's over, right? But I won't do it unconsciously anymore. Not that I'm doing it maliciously. It's just like, oh, react. And there you are. It's like, oh, hit it again, and then recalibrate. And that's what it is, over and over and over throughout our lives. As we practice it, and we practice it, and we practice it, not only do we wind up at Carnegie Hall, okay, but it becomes more habitual. It becomes our default. And then we're really walking in our lives and expressing the Christ as a natural tendency. It doesn't feel so weird anymore. I don't feel uncomfortable about speaking my truth to another, especially someone who's struggling. Like oftentimes somebody's struggling there with us and it's like, I don't know the words to say. Hey, you're right. You don't know the words to say. And so what you need to do is get out of the way and allow that Christ to come through, because the Christ will speak things that you wouldn't say in your own humanness, right? That we have to surrender time and time and time again. It's always an act of surrender, and that surrender is a very gentle process. What I'm going to read next here, this comes from a section in A Course in Miracles, and the title of the section is Christmas as the End of Sacrifice. Right? Christmas as the end of sacrifice. There's another part, maybe we'll talk about this come around Easter time, where A Course in Miracles reframes the message of the crucifixion, right? And the reframing has to do with, it could not have been a sacrifice for Jesus to lay down his life, because he came to demonstrate the Christ. That was part of the process. That's why he was able to say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Right? They're in all of this angst and everything's all kinds of people upset that they're crucifying Jesus. There are people that are participating in the crucifixion. And there's all this confusion and all this sadness. And from Jesus's place, it was necessary. It was a necessary process to do it. Why? Because we're still talking about it. That's why.
Yeah.
2,000 years later, at a point in time when they didn't have social media and news wasn't all connected and wired as it is now. And that truth lasted over the course of time, So I'll read this section about Christmas as the end of sacrifice. You who believe that sacrifice is love must learn that sacrifice is separation from love. For sacrifice brings guilt as surely as love brings peace. Guilt is the condition of sacrifice, as peace is the condition for the awareness of your relationship with God. Through guilt, you exclude your father and your brothers from yourself. Through peace, you invite them back, realizing that they are where your invitation bids them be. There's an idea in A Course in Miracles, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the basic idea is that heaven is incomplete until everyone is there. Right? If all of us were in the consciousness of heaven, and we saw heaven right now, and we had the consciousness that we are in heaven right now, and Roberta was over there holding out an intention that she still didn't see it, we could be experiencing heaven, but only in a limited measure, because it's not complete until Roberta comes along as well. And we can see the Christ in Roberta and invite her into that, but until she accepts and is willing to receive it, she's not really separated in capital R reality, but she can have the experience of herself being separated. We might even have the experience of her being separated as long as she's holding out, but it takes her willingness to join what is already true, and that completes it. So as we're looking around the world, moving through the world in the coming year in particular, one of the things that we can do here today is to affirm an intention for ourselves. The first step is for me, for you to accept the Christ for ourselves. I don't have to worry about convincing somebody else or persuading somebody else to come along, right? The real work is when I accept it for myself. And that when I accept it for myself, heaven starts shining a little brighter. And that light within me starts shining a little brighter. And then I'm not forcing myself on anyone to convince them or persuade them, but they are being attracted by the energy that I'm expressing, because I'm coming from a place of love. And there's a whole bunch of attendant kinds of experiences that come along with embodying that place of love: peace, joy, empathy, compassion. All of those things are the result, the effect of choosing love and choosing to express love. And as I said a moment ago, Jesus's entire gospel, his entire teaching, can be distilled down to that one word: love. There's one part where he speaks about, faith, hope, and love. All those are great, but the greatest of these three is love. And so it's really simple to teach. It's really simple for us to understand. It's not as simple for us actually to act on that consistently in our lives. Because as I said here, Christmas is not about sacrifice. God is not forcing us into compliance, right? We're free to choose. And it must be that way. It must be that way because only when you freely choose to express love, if I was forcing Debbie to express love, that wouldn't be love on my part, number one, and it wouldn't be a form of love on her part in compliance. It requires our cooperation. It requires our willingness. It requires our conscious agreement to align ourselves in love and with love and become willing vessels, channels, expressions of that love. As I mentioned a moment ago, the idea about the Christ is always coming, the second coming is always coming, that it's a perpetual dynamic and that it happens in that holy instant, right? So I'll read the couple little sections here. And I've already said this in one way or another. The holy instant is this instant and every instant. Because in every single instant of our lives, there is that potential for us, for that dawn of the Christ awareness, that Christ consciousness to dawn in our awareness is what I should say. Every single instant. And it's not something we can take for granted, right? It's not something that, it doesn't necessarily happen on autopilot because it does require our willingness to express that. That's what we have to keep surrendering to. There's days when you don't feel like surrendering. There's days when you might feel embattled and you feel like you got to puff up to protect what's yours and everything. And we do that. I mean, we just do. But underneath that fight, that protection, what's underneath that is that I've chosen fear. That's a truth. That's a capital truth, that if I'm in protective mode, if I'm in defensive mode, that underneath that, at the foundation of that choice is fear. And that's what we have to shine a light on. That's what the light of the Christ is about. And it's gentle. Remember Christmas as the end of sacrifice. We're not being asked to sacrifice anything. We're merely being invited into an awareness of the truth that is, and that we put our willingness on the table and align ourselves with that truth. And the yoke, as they say, is gentle. It's not harsh. We're not being dragged around. You can't drag somebody around and force them to love. Think about it. You can't force somebody to love. That's not love. What can I do to help Lissy get to a place where she naturally expresses love? I help to model that. I give her an example. Like, Rick, what's going on with you, man? Something's changing you. And well, no, Lissy is like I was doing this, that, and the other, and I just chose love. Right? And I've been choosing it consistently. Well, tell me more about that. And we invite them back into that connection. And when they put their willingness on the table and they're actually inquiring, then it's like that already implies willingness, right? That already implies willingness just in the question. So what is ours to do? Ours is to connect with our own Christ. That's my business. That literally takes up so much of my time that I don't have time to mend and tend to everybody else. But as we connect, then something's different. Something's different about you. Tell me more. And then we can connect with that. It's gentle. There is no sacrifice. That invitation, as they said in the Course in Miracles reading, is an invitation back to peace. You cannot fight for peace, folks. Think about it. You cannot fight for peace. How are you going to know when peace is there? If you're always in a fight. It's a different energy. We can have another talk on another day, but just to explore the energetic difference between compliance and cooperation. Completely different energies. Compliance, you will either do this or you will face some sort of punishment or recriminations. Stay in line, but that is force. That is coming from fear. That is appealing to our guilt, our sense of shame. Oh yeah, I'm a bad person, therefore I must comply. Just stop calling me a bad person. I'll comply. It's not love. And that's what Jesus is teaching us. That's what the Christ and the birth of the Christ into the world. That's our example. I love the way that Eric Butterworth says that Jesus is not the great exception. He's the great example. There's a tendency for some of us to put Jesus off in a special box. Like, no, he's down here on the ground with us. He's walking beside us. He's walking hand in hand. There's no sacrifice. Christmas is the end of that, symbolically, metaphysically. If we bring it into our hearts and we begin to live it, then it does become a practical teaching, because as A Course in Miracles says, you're not being asked to believe any of this. I'm not trying to persuade you. You're not asked to believe any of this. What you are asked to do is to practice what you're being taught. And if you're willing to practice it, your own experience will show you the truth of it. No one will have to persuade you. No one will have to convince you. If you put your willingness on the table and you practice what you're being taught, you'll know it's the truth, because your experience will change. And consciousness, all of a sudden, there's no separation anymore. I find myself being critical less. I find myself not slipping into judgmental views less and less. Because I know, like, as soon as I'm tempted to go there, it's like, yeah, I know, but that's not reality. Reality is love. And so, yeah, I can go play there if I want to. God will not stop me. God will not stop me from going and being in fear if that's what I choose to do. But it's my choice. And that the awareness that it is my choice is empowering. It's empowering. And that's what our languaging should be. That's what our expression should be. That's what our demonstration to one another should be, is one of empowerment. I'm inviting you into connection. I'm inviting you into community. I'm inviting you into peace. I can't force you into any of those things. And even if I could seemingly force you into it, I'd have to be on vigil all the time, making sure that you stay right where I need you to stay. That's exhausting, because it's compliance, not cooperation. So in that energy of the Christ being born today, Christmas Day, where we celebrate symbolically and metaphysically the birth of the Christ, just remember, moving forward, that's happening in every single instant, perpetually, dynamically, ongoing and ongoing, and will be ongoing until time ends, at whatever time that is. Like, who knows what time that is, right? If there is such a thing. But we're perfecting our expression in this process. And it does require each and every single one of us ultimately to get ourselves individually into that space to accept the Christ. And this is not like a Jesus saves kind of thing. This is not like you're going to go to hell if you don't. Although we could make an argument that that experience of fear is an experience of hell as well. And if I accept that, then that hell that I'm experiencing is a self-created one. I'm co-creating that experience because I'm unwilling to choose love. So Jesus comes along and teaches us, hey, what I can do, you can do. In fact, you'll do even greater things than this. Isn't that great? Like,
Yeah.
we kind of pass that sometimes. Like, you'll do even greater. I can do greater things than changing water into wine. That's really good. I can do greater things than raising the dead. What could that possibly be? But I take him at his word, because as we demonstrate more and more of our own individual Christ power, that it's not us over there going to the gym, so to speak, on our own, that we're joining a power that is perpetually dynamic, is ongoing. And that as I join myself into that, it's not just me. It's not just me. I become more powerful because I'm part of this greater power. I am actually part of the greater power, whether I realize it or not. But when I get into willing cooperation with it, that is very powerful. And it's the same for me as it is for you, as it is for everyone. And so as we move forward into the new year, you know, like next week and in the coming weeks, we're going to be setting new intentions for the new year and everything. What I would like to invite you to on this Christmas Day is this awareness of that perpetual dynamic principle of the Christ being worked out in you, and you, and you. And then as we move forward in the world, that we accept that that's not just for Christmas anymore. It's not just for Christmas. It's something that we should be embodying and expressing each and every day. So the Christ is always now. The holy instant is always now. I'm going to close with this last reading right here. In the holy instant, the condition of love is met, for minds are joined without the body's interference. And where there is communication, there is peace. There's another idea developed in the Course in Miracles, and this was, I have had people like look at me like, what do you mean? Bodies cannot join. Bodies cannot join. Only minds can join. Only minds can join. And we go, well, we seem to be joining. Bodies seem to be joining, seem to be connecting your bodies. Like, no, you literally cannot join another body. We can join through our bodies by joining one another in mind, in consciousness. And that's what Jesus is calling us to. That's what the whole process calls us and invites us to. Not dragging us along, it's inviting us. See the difference in the energy there?
Mhm.
It's an invitation. And if it's an invitation, you're free to accept or not. Anybody ever said, hey, you coming Saturday night? Yeah, I'm going to try to be there.
Uh-huh.
There is no try, right? There's only do and do not. So anytime you say that, you know you're not committed to coming. You may as well just say, not sure. I might have other plans.
Yeah. Or you could
Or just say no.
No.
No,
Yeah.
not. Yeah. Unavailable, unwilling,
Yeah.
whatever, not coming. But you can't try to do something.
Right.
You're either doing it or not. And it's the same way with Christ. You can't try to be a little more Christ-like. You can't try that. You're either doing it or you're not. And if you're trying it, you're not doing it. Right? You're just had to look too closely here. Maybe one day it'll overtake me. No, it won't. It won't overtake you without your willing cooperation. Your willingness is required. That's one of the Christmases, the end of sacrifice. Because if I had to sacrifice something, I'd be resistant to that. Well, what I got to sacrifice? Pretty much everything. What? I got a lot of stuff. I like my stuff.
Okay.
Right? Remember the rich man?
Yeah.
Yeah. Easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than a rich man to get into heaven because of that attachment to the stuff. That's why we're not being asked to sacrifice. We're being invited to join, and we can be accepted exactly where we are. And every good thing that I may have accumulated along the way up to that decision, all of that can be used. All of that can be employed in the expression of the Christ, but not until I'm willing. And if I'm unwilling long enough, the universe will find a way to take it away from me because it's going to move that stuff to where it can be useful. And if I'm unwilling to use it, to make it of utility, then it's like, dude, you're not getting it. Okay. I gave you all these tools to help us to move the ball forward. And if you're unwilling to do it, I'm going to have to bench you. Right? Go ride the pine over there. That's the way it is. This is teamwork. This is total teamwork. This is like the ultimate teamwork. And so we're being called to that. And that Christ moment is now. The holy instant is now. And it will be now 5 seconds from now. And we're always being invited into it. So as we take this into meditation, we turn our attention to go into our contemplative time here. First thing I want to do is invite you to forget everything I just said. Just forget it. And the reason is that you already know these things. You don't have to intellectually figure it out. That when we go in and we connect with that Christ within and the silence and everything, all the truth that is useful to you today will be communicated to you. Because the indwelling Christ in you, the indwelling Christ in me, the indwelling Christ in Marilyn, the indwelling Christ in Jesus is the same one Christ. It's the same one Christ. And that's where we get into oneness. That's where we get into unity. That's where we get into community and communication is in that. And we become willing vessels for that. So with that intention, I just invite you to shake it off. We're going to have you sing us into yeah, come on up.
Mary, did you know your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know your baby boy has come to make you new? And that child that you deliver will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know? Did you know? Did you know? Oh, oh. Mary, did you know? Did you know? Did you know that sleeping child you're holding is the great I am? I am. I am. I am. I am. I am. I am.
Beautiful, Ann. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just breathe that in. There is nothing to do here except be still and know that I am. That indwelling Christ presence within each one of us. That same one master teacher that even Jesus had. You and I and everyone has access to that same one master teacher. And the one principal lesson being taught to us is love. Love is the foundation. Love is our essence, our natural state of being. Our work is to surrender everything that blocks that expression, that blocks that communication, that simple message of love. We all know it. It's imprinted in our heart. It's the blueprint of our soul. Anything that we do need to be taught can be taught by that inner teacher. Our role is just simply be still and know, be willing to connect with that indwelling teacher for guidance in all of our affairs, our relationships, our creative work, our health, our prosperity, our peace. The answers that we need are always within. We're never without them. So as we prepare in the silence, we open our hearts, we open our ears, we open our inner vision to be shown. We place our willingness on the table and we ask that indwelling Christ presence, show me what is mine to do right here, right now, in the silence. As we begin to gently draw our attention back into our respective spaces, we do so in the knowledge and the awareness that the Christ is within, the kingdom of heaven is within, the seat and the power of love, that source of divine love is within. We don't need it. We already have it. If there is a need, it is simply for us to get out of the way and allow that love, allow that creative power of love to express through us. And so in this instant, in this holy instant, in this meditative space, we say yes to the Christ. On this Christmas day, we reaffirm our commitment to be willing expressions of that Christ imprint, to put our willingness on the table each day, to be shown, to be taught, to be led gently, without any sacrifice, in the direction of that Christ love. And for the truth of that Christ love, for the power of that Christ love, for the availability of that Christ love, we say thank you. Thank you. Thank you, living, loving Spirit. We pray all of this and more in the name and the nature of Jesus, the indwelling Christ presence. And so it is, so we allow it to be. Amen.
Again.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Holidays, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah.